All right, let's get rolling today. We're going to be looking at Mercedes Sprinter vans
Yeah.
and what it's like to really live with one from the perspective of Darren over at the OdysseyCamper.com travel blog.
Yeah, Darren just
Well,
finished a 6,000-mile road trip and documented all the good and the bad and all the
yes.
things in between.
Great, because he's got that van life experience, but from the Honda Odyssey minivan side of things. So
Yeah,
this is a really interesting perspective.
exactly. He's got a point of reference, so it's really valuable to hear what he has to say.
So one of the biggest questions is fuel economy. How many miles per gallon can you get in one of these things?
Yeah, so he was pleasantly surprised. He was averaging 25 to 26 miles per gallon, even fully loaded for his trip.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
impressive
Yeah.
for a 6,000-pound van.
Yeah.
So are there any trade-offs, though, to get that kind of fuel economy? Like, did it feel underpowered?
Well, the Sprinter has a turbocharged diesel engine, but it only puts out 166 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he said the pulling power was surprisingly strong.
So it's not about the horsepower, it's about how that power is
Well,
delivered.
exactly. He said he could even spin the tires from a standstill if he really wanted to. So,
Wow.
not a sports car, but it can get up and go.
Cool. So decent fuel economy, surprisingly peppy. How about handling? I imagine a van that size could feel a little bit boat-like on the road.
Yeah, you'd think so, but he actually praised the handling. He found it really secure and stable even at highway speeds, and he was comparing it favorably to other large vans that he's driven. He felt like the Sprinter was much more planted.
Okay, that's good to know. So every vehicle has its quirks, though.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that Darren wasn't so thrilled about?
Well, one thing that stood out was the turbo lag.
Okay.
He said there's a noticeable delay between stepping on the gas and feeling that turbocharger kick in.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't gearheads, break it down for us. What is turbo lag and how does it affect the driving experience?
Sure, so with the turbocharged engine, after you hit the gas, there's this split-second pause where it feels like nothing is happening.
Yeah.
And then suddenly that turbo spools up and you get that surge of power.
Okay, so not ideal for merging onto the highway or passing a slower vehicle.
Exactly, and that's what he was saying. You have to anticipate the lag and almost like preemptively hit the gas to get the response that you need.
Okay, so that sounds like it could be frustrating, especially if you're used to a more responsive engine. Did he mention if it was worse in certain situations, like on steep hills or when the van was fully loaded?
He didn't go into a ton of detail, but he did say it felt similar to driving some of those older turbocharged vehicles from like the 80s,
Oh, yeah.
which were notorious for that.
All right, so that's something to be aware of. How about visibility? Good all-around vision is super important in a large vehicle.
Absolutely. So he actually raved about the forward visibility. He
Hmm.
said the high seating position gives you a commanding view of the road, and the side mirrors are huge. So you don't really have any blind spots, but there's one caveat to that. He said the rear visibility is pretty much non-existent unless you add rear windows.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're essentially driving a metal box on wheels.
Yeah.
Let's talk about space.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the big selling points of a Sprinter van.
Absolutely. He emphasized just how massive the interior is, especially if you get that high roof option. He said you can stand up and walk around comfortably. It's a game changer for van life.
Nice. Yeah.
He even joked that he thinks his entire Honda Odyssey could fit inside the Sprinter.
That's funny. A van within a van.
Yeah.
So we've got the fuel economy. We've got the surprisingly peppy acceleration. We've got decent handling, a cavernous interior. But I know there were also some challenges that Darren ran into, getting in and out of the van, for example.
Yeah, so his height came into play a little bit here. He's 6'5".
Oh, wow.
So he found it to be quite a climb to get in and out of the van. He even compared it to like clambering into a semi-truck. He joked that shorter people might need a stepladder to get in there.
So not exactly graceful entry and exit.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a deal breaker for someone who is shorter or maybe has mobility issues?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something to consider if you're thinking about a Sprinter. The high ground clearance is great for off-roading, but it does make it a little bit more strenuous to get in and out.
All right, noted. Now let's talk about parking this beast. Did he manage to squeeze into those compact city parking spots?
Not without some maneuvering. He said the long wheelbase definitely made parking a challenge, and he often had to back into spots to fit.
Okay.
Which brings us to another point, the backup camera.
Yeah, that's essential in a vehicle this big. Did it make parking any easier?
Well, unfortunately, not really. The backup camera on the model he drove was positioned in a way that provided very limited visibility. He said it only showed about 3 feet behind the van.
That's almost useless.
Yeah, it's not super helpful.
You would think a vehicle designed for road trips and potentially navigating tight spaces would have a better backup camera system.
You would think so. He thinks this might have been a quirk with the older model that he was driving, so hopefully the newer ones have been updated.
All right, fingers crossed. Now let's switch gears and talk about diesel exhaust fluid. This is something that anyone considering a diesel vehicle needs to be aware of.
Right. And he said the Sprinter does require DZF and it needs to be refilled periodically, but the downside is there's no gauge to tell you how much is left. You just get a warning light when it's almost empty.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Did he have any recommendations for how to deal with that?
Well, he suggested carrying an extra jug just in case and, familiarize yourself with the refilling process, which he said is a little awkward.
Okay, so DFF requires some extra attention, but it's a necessary part of owning a diesel Sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
What about just the availability and price of diesel fuel itself? Did that pose any challenges during his 6,000-mile journey?
Yeah, so he found that diesel is widely available, but it's not as ubiquitous as gasoline.
Right.
So he had to do a little bit of planning, especially in certain areas, to make sure he could find it. And he noted that the prices can fluctuate a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even within short distances, so it pays to shop around.
Especially if you're covering a lot of ground.
Did he share any memorable experiences related to fuel?
He told a story about driving through Kentucky and barely finding a diesel pump before running out of fuel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a close call, but it highlighted the importance of not letting that fuel gauge get too low.
Yeah, especially when you're in unfamiliar territory.
Okay, so anything else about the fuel situation?
Well, despite the good fuel economy, he felt like the 21-gallon tank was a bit of a missed opportunity.
Oh, how so?
He thought a larger tank would have made more sense for a vehicle that's designed for long-distance travel. It would give more peace of mind and less frequent fuel stops.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially if you're going off the grid.
So we've covered the fuel economy, the power, the handling some of those little quirks like the turbo lag and the DEF and the fuel tank. What about maintenance cost? I mean, are we talking standard car maintenance, or is there anything we should be prepared for with the Sprinter?
Well, one thing that caught him off guard was the cost of oil changes.
Oh, really?
Get this, he paid $171 for an oil change.
What?
Yeah.
That's more than some car payments.
Oh, no, right?
What's going on there? Why is it so expensive?
It's a few factors. So the Sprinter requires a specialized type of oil, and it takes 12 quarts.
Oh, wow.
And even if you do it yourself, the oil filter itself is pricey.
So those regular maintenance costs can really add up.
Yeah, definitely something to factor into your budget if you're thinking about a Sprinter.
All right, let's pause there for a moment. When we come back, we'll delve into some of Darren's more subjective observations about the Sprinter, including its luxury or lack thereof, and some safety considerations. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. We left off talking about the not-so-fun part of Sprinter ownership, the oil changes. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk luxury. Does the Sprinter live up to the Mercedes Benz reputation?
Yeah, let's talk luxury. I mean, we all appreciate a bit of comfort and style, especially when we're spending a lot of time on the road. Did the Sprinter feel like a high-end ride?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Darren was quick to point out that the interior is more utilitarian than luxurious.
Right.
He said, think durable, but basic, lots of hard plastics, and simple functionality.
So not exactly a rolling palace then.
Not quite. No, he actually made a funny comparison. He said the seat material felt similar to his cat's bed.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, it doesn't sound like comfort was really a priority for Mercedes when they were designing the Sprinter's cabin.
Maybe it's a case of function over form. I mean, if you're using it for van life, you're probably going to be customizing the interior anyways.
Right, good point. And despite the lack of fancy materials, he did say that the ride itself was surprisingly comfortable.
Okay.
He attributed that to the high sidewall tires and the long wheelbase, which helps smooth out the bumps and dips in the road.
Okay, so maybe not the most luxurious interior, but a comfortable ride is a definite plus, especially for those long journeys. Now, let's talk safety. What were Darren's thoughts on how safe he felt in the Sprinter?
This is where the Sprinter's size comes into play. He pointed out that in a collision, a larger, heavier vehicle generally fares better than a smaller one.
Right.
Just basic physics, more mass equals more force absorption. So in that sense, the Sprinter has an advantage.
But I imagine there are also some safety downsides to consider, especially with the camper conversion.
Yeah, exactly. He highlighted the lack of crush space in the front end of the Sprinter.
Right.
And if you've built out the interior with cabinets, appliances, all your gear, all that stuff could become projectiles in a serious accident.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So it seems like safety in a Sprinter is a little bit of a trade-off. The size and weight offer some protection, but the lack of crumple zones and the potential for loose objects to become hazards are real concerns.
Definitely something to think about carefully if you're considering converting a Sprinter now on a lighter note. Darren shared this funny anecdote about something he called re-entry turbulence.
Re-entry turbulence.
Yeah.
I'm picturing astronauts bracing for impact. What is he talking about?
So he used that phrase to describe the experience of driving close behind a semi-truck.
Oh, okay.
Because the Sprinter has such a large, flat profile, it's more susceptible to those swirling air currents that big rigs create. He said it felt like the van was being rocked around by the turbulence.
Wow, that does sound a little unnerving.
A little bit, so it's like the Sprinter's getting caught in the semi's slipstream.
Yeah.
So
right.
if you're following a big truck, it's probably wise to give it a little more space than you normally would.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
There we go.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Fuel efficiency, power, handling those little quirks like the turbo lag and the DEF, even luxury and safety. So after 6,000 miles in a Sprinter, did Darren give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
It's not a simple yes or no answer. He acknowledged that the Sprinter is a very capable vehicle. It has a lot to offer,
Yeah.
but it also comes with its share of compromises.
Right.
So he really encouraged potential buyers to weigh the pros and cons and decide if it's the right fit for their needs and lifestyle.
So it's not about one vehicle being inherently better than another. It's about finding the one that aligns with your specific priorities.
Exactly. And for Darren, it seems like the Sprinter couldn't quite dethrone his beloved Honda Odyssey.
Interesting, after all, that he still prefers his minivan.
It seems so.
Hmm.
There's something to be said for the versatility and practicality of a smaller, more maneuverable vehicle, especially if you're not solely focused on off-grid adventures.
I can definitely see the appeal of having a vehicle that's easier to park and navigate in those urban environments. Plus, minivans have come a long way in terms of features and comfort. But tell me, did Darren leave us with any parting thoughts about the Sprinter? Any final words of wisdom?
Well, he did mention something that I thought was quite intriguing. He said that he had a hammock set up in the back of the Sprinter.
A hammock? Now, that's an image, I have to admit. That sounds pretty cool.
It suggests a sense of freedom and relaxation, which I think is at the heart of the Sprinter's appeal for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like a symbol of that adventurous, go-anywhere spirit that the Sprinter embodies. It reminds us that it's not just a vehicle. It's a blank canvas for creating your own mobile haven.
Exactly. And that's a perfect segue into what we'll be discussing in the next segment. The bigger picture of what Darren's experience tells us about the allure and the realities of Sprinter van life. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We've been going through Darren's 6,000 miles Sprinter van adventure, covering everything from fuel economy to luxury or the lack thereof. But now I'm curious, what does it all mean if someone is out there thinking it's a Sprinter for me? What are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that the Sprinter is like any tool, right? It's fantastic for certain tasks, but not the best for every job. It really shines for folks who need space, who appreciate that robust platform for customization, and maybe enjoy getting their hands dirty with it.
So not a prepackaged RV experience.
Exactly.
It's more like a blank canvas.
Exactly. And I think that's where Darren's insights are so valuable because he focuses on not just the obvious stuff, but those little nuances that make or break the van life experience.
Right.
Things like the turbo lag, dealing with the DFE, even just getting in and out of the van.
Right. These are things you don't find in a brochure.
Exactly. It's all about those real-world practical considerations.
It makes you wonder, who is the Sprinter really designed for? What kind of person thrives in that environment?
That's a great question. I think it appeals to a certain breed of adventurer, someone who values independence, who is drawn to the DIY aspect, and maybe even embraces a bit of a challenge.
So not your average vacationer looking for a plug-and-play experience.
No.
These are people who want to build their own mobile haven,
Absolutely.
tailored to their specific needs and preferences.
Right, and they understand that this level of personalization comes with some compromises.
Right.
It's all about finding the right balance
Yeah.
between capability, comfort, and cost.
Speaking of cost, we can't forget about those pricey oil changes. That's definitely something to think about.
Oh, yeah, it's a significant expense. But let's look at the flip side. You're investing in a vehicle that is built to last. The Sprinter is known for its durability and reliability, especially those diesel engines.
Right.
It's peace of mind, especially if you're venturing out far from civilization.
That peace of mind is invaluable for anyone embracing a nomadic lifestyle. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about having a vehicle you can trust to get you there and back,
That's a great way to put it.
no matter what challenges you might encounter along the way.
It's all about that freedom, that self-sufficiency, knowing that you're equipped for whatever the road throws at you.
We've covered a lot today, from those practicalities to those little quirks that make the Sprinter unique. But as we wrap up, is there one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with, something to ponder as they contemplate their van life dreams?
Well, here's something to chew on. Imagine you're designing your dream Sprinter van conversion. What are your must-haves? What compromises are you willing to make?
That's a great question. It forces you to really think about what's important, what features enhance your experience, and what are you willing to sacrifice.
Exactly. It highlights the beauty of the Sprinter. It's a blank slate that allows you to create a space that truly reflects you.
A huge thank you to Darren for sharing his firsthand experience and insights with us. If you want to see more photos and videos from his 6,000-mile Sprinter van adventure, head over to his blog at odysseycamper.com.
And don't forget to check out his YouTube channel, Odyssey Camper, for even more great content on van life travel and all things adventure.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Mercedes Sprinter van. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep those wheels rolling.